All right, let's get started. Hey, thanks for joining us. My name is Bob Harford. I'm with Potomac Wave Consulting. I lead the Fed Data Check team, which is a product that helps 14 agencies now improve their procurement metrics, one of which is their HUBZone goaling percentage, which is what we're going to talk about today. If you want to talk or comment, have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you on your GoToWebinar controls, or you could type in a question. I see we already have a question. Someone's having trouble opening up the presentation PowerPoint deck. Sadie, I'm going to send that to everyone after the presentation via email, so you can get to it that way. And I'm having trouble typing that in. So anyway, that's the answer to that. Hey, so today's webinar, and lately these have been running over an hour. This one we're going to keep to an hour or under. So this one's not going to be as long. Try to keep them. That last one we had, if you were on it, was a multiple year versus multi-year. That was a tough one to get through. So this one should be more fun and not go as long. Try to keep these to an hour. Okay, the agenda for today. We're going to go through some definitions like we always do, definition of terms. And then we're going to talk about where are HUBZones, who are the HUBZone vendors, and then the case of the missing HUBZone vendors of the Northern Mariana Islands. Some informational resources for HUBZones, and then do a review. Introductions as to who I am, more about Fed Data Check at Potomac Wave. I save those to the end. They're repetitive, the same every week. Please stay on, though. If you're not familiar with us, ask us questions. We'd love to talk to you. Okay. Well, actually, let's, before I get into that, I want to do a poll. And that is, have you ever made a HUBZone set aside? This should be HUBZone, by the way, not multiple year. That's holdover from last week. Have you ever made a HUBZone small business set aside or HUBZone sole source award? We have a few who have answered yes. So if you have answered yes, I hope you will consider commenting and sharing your experience today. Just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. All right, about a third of you have, we'll close that poll, maybe a little more than a third. So a lot of you have. And let's see, I want to do one more poll before we get into the definitions. Let's see what your answer is. Oh, by the way, we offer CLP credit, continuous learning points, for participating on this webinar, but you have to get a score, a interest rating that's done by our vendor of who supplies the webinar capability called GoToWebinar. And one of the keys, I believe, on that is keep your shared screen, keep the GoToWebinar shared screen window on your main monitor. So if you got two monitors, leave us up on the main one. That's how you're going to get that interest rating above 40 and participate in these polls. Okay, getting a good answer on this one. Okay, I'm going to close that. The answer to that is all of the above. So let's get into the definition. They're typically, so you're virtually all of you are right there. They typically are low, medium household incomes or high unemployment. So if you look at this SBA document here, let's take a look at it. For example, if you're looking at a qualified census tract, we're going to look at counties and census tracts. Census tract is a neighborhood. It can be a pretty small area. It qualifies if it has a poverty rate of at least 25% or 50% or more of its household incomes. 50% or more of its householders must have incomes below 60% of the area median household income. So that's a census tract. And let's see what and they've got county, non-metropolitan county. These are the two main geographic areas. Median household income in the county must be less than 80% of the non-metropolitan state median household income, or unemployment rate must be at least 140% of the national or state unemployment rate. So there, the two main areas we're gonna talk about, geographic areas that are tied to HUBZones. A rural county, non-metropolitan county. They're talking about income, unemployment. That census tract, they were talking about poverty rate and income. So typically incomes and unemployment rate, that's going to be what designates the HUBZone. So then that begs the question, well, what's with the typically? Why isn't it always like that? And the answer is there are 4 other areas that can also be tied to HUBZones. And let's look at, here's a citation in the statutes, Code of Federal Regulations, but let's read them here. Something called a redesignated area. That is an area that is formerly was a HUBZone. So it formerly was designated as via a census tract or a non-metropolitan county as a HUBZone. It met the income, the poverty, and unemployment tests. But it got redesignated, which means that it fell out of that. It no longer met those tests. Nonetheless, that area is still in there for 3 years. 3 years, so it gets redesignated as no longer HUBZone, but nonetheless, it continues to stay a HUBZone for 3 years. So you get a 3-year sunset provision.
So I was asking what a HUBZone stands for.
HUBZone, what does HUBZone stand for? It's historically underutilized business zone. HUB, historically underutilized business zone, as a HUBZone. A major disaster area. So this is an area, again, that's a former HUBZone. You know, we just had a lot of hurricanes. So let's say you're a HUBZone in Florida, based on a rural county in Florida. Would that be more, let's say a census tract, more like to be on the coast. Well, even let's say a rural county on the coast of Florida. But you were a HUBZone 2 years ago, but you're no longer a HUBZone today, 2018. Then Hurricane Maria comes through. The president declares a major disaster area for Florida that covers your area. Then you would once again become a HUBZone. So you're a former HUBZone, the hurricane 2 years ago, the hurricane comes through and you're a declared major disaster area. Now you are a HUBZone once again due to that former HUBZone status and a major disaster declaration. Military base. So if you were a military, part of that military base closure that happened many years ago, those were designated HUBZone areas, and some still are. Indian land, you know, from what I read in the papers, Indian land might also qualify on the low medium household or high unemployment. But regardless of that, it could be the wealthiest, maybe some of these places with casinos. Again, I'm just shooting from the hip on this, but it could be the wealthiest Indian land around. But as long as it was an Indian that land was tied to an Indian reservation before December 21st, 2000, it's a HUB zone. And there's some other specifications after that date. All right, why are we doing? Why does the federal government do this? What's the point of this HUB zone? It provides federal contracting assistance to qualified small firms located in HUB zones to increase employment opportunities, stimulate capital investment in those areas, and empower communities through economic leveraging. If you're asking me personally, it sounds like a pretty good idea. To direct some federal contracting assistance, get people involved in the economic activity through the government on a basis of this program. Intuitively, it makes sense. So that's the stated purpose. If you click on that link, where do we go here? That is in a lot of those definitions you can read in the HUBZone mini primer. Anytime in this PowerPoint deck you see that underline, that means I've got it hyperlinked. For these, you can go out to the statutes and read them. All right, any questions so far? Okay. All right, the HUBZone map. So the SBA recently came out with a nice map. There's all the HUB zones. And you can see it covers a lot of the country. So we're going to go out and take a look at it. So this is a vendor could say, gee, vendor Acme Inc. is making plumbing supplies in northern Wisconsin. Hey, maybe I'm a HUB zone. Maybe we're in a HUB zone. Let's go to the map and find out. That's one of the main purposes of why they put up this map, is so that vendors can go and look for themselves as to whether their business is in an area that is a designated HUB zone. Let me ask one other question here. How about this one? What state has the nearest Indian land? You can see that Indian land is part of this map legend. We can zero in on just those. What state has the nearest Indian land HUB zone to the DMV area? District, Maryland, Virginia. Okay, we're getting everywhere. Got votes for all 5 states so far. All right, let's close it up. So most of you said Oklahoma, and as you can see, boy, there's a lot of blue there. So Oklahoma is a good guess. If you were particularly sharp-eyed, you could have seen some blue up there in New York State, upstate New York, which is closer to the DMV area. But let's zero in on that. So we're going to uncheck everything but Indian land. So there's all the Indian land. Again, if you're a reservation land before that December 2000 cutoff, you're a HUB zone. You can see some here. That looks like North Carolina, Tennessee, right there. Let's start zeroing in on the DMV. There's New York. It's close there. I can see some blue right there. That's if anyone else sees some blue other than here, let me know. I didn't. See, I don't see any blue. There it is. That's what there's a spot in Virginia that was Indian tribal land, and it's next to Poplar Grove, Virginia. If I click on it, Indian land, qualified hub zone. Poplar Grove, Chohoke. So that's not too far, a little bit south in Virginia from the DMV. Let's see, if someone could type in for where they're from. Is anyone here from east of the Mississippi? If you could type in where you are as a question. East of the Mississippi. Anyone from east of the Mississippi? West of the Mississippi, rather. West of the Mississippi? Monica, did you have a... Monica, I think you had a dog there. Let me see if I can get someone else here. Karen, did you have a question or a comment?
Just saying we're from Chicago here.
All right. Yeah, let's take a look at that. So if I go into Chicago, one of the Fed Data Check team members is from Chicago originally. All right, I'm not seeing any Indian land. Chicago's right up here, right? How about a county? Now here's a rural county. Let's see where that is. Lewiston, Havana, Mason City, next to a little closer to Peoria. But you can see now Chicago is going to not be obviously not a metropolitan area. It is going to be a metropolitan area. So that means the geographic area is going to be a census tract. Where is that? Come on. Right here. There's some Indian land up there in Michigan. All right, so let's go to the census tract. Now you start getting the census tract. See, I unchecked that. Here's Chicago. Keep zeroing in. What I'm doing is I'm hitting this plus or minus thing to zero in. So here's Chicago, Lincoln Park, Lakeview. Along the waterfront, not so much, huh? Which one would think? Along the waterfront, my guess would be higher incomes, not as much unemployment. North Chicago, on the water. On these other areas, south side Chicago, then you get the census tracts that meet those definitions we saw, which was, what was it? Poverty rate of 25%, for example. So does that map make sense to you, Karen, just looking at it?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can get someone else. Rita. You still there, Rita? No? Okay. All right. So let's go back to the slide there. So, the SBA HUBZone Map, your vendors who you make the award to can check where they are. We're going to go through all of these designations. Okay, so if you're looking at this map here, and let's look at the first three qualified hub zones on this legend up here. The census tract, well, that could be a rural, suburban, or urban area. So there is no you know, you could be occupy a neighborhood, right? What we just saw was an urban area, but if you go to where I live, which is Arlington County, Virginia, let's type that in, which is, I'm going to say that's a suburban area. You know, if you see that? I mean, they got little neighborhoods in here that meet that. That's a Arlington neighborhood, Ashton Heights. And you'll see them out in rural areas as well. Let's see if we can see one that's more rural in Virginia. You know, Orange County is pretty rural. Here's one that looks pretty rural. Look at this one way out there, and that's got to be a rural area. Clifton Forge, I'd say it's pretty rural. Okay, so those areas, the census tracts can be anywhere. The other ones are non-metropolitan counties. So that's the secondary. That's the red. So they leave that out, but it's non-metropolitan. That's where those counties are. Let's call it rural areas. And if you do that, shift that, and you go to like Henry County, Virginia. See, there you get the whole much bigger area. The whole county is designated as a hub zone. And the third area, we kind of looked at that already, Indian land. So we saw that with that small area in southern Virginia. You could see it in Oklahoma. Let's zoom back out. Get this minus sign, zoom out. We'll flip it over to Indian land. New York, that's got a, you know, there are upstate New York ones there. Wisconsin, a lot. And where you would expect out west more. Okay, so these three types of areas, the Census Tract County and Indian land, they meet the lower income or higher unemployment test now. So they are, as we speak, they're able, they meet those poverty rates, income tests, medium household income, and so on. So some of those tests, and you could see this more by clicking on this link. If you're to be qualified as via the Census Tract geographic area, you got to have a poverty rate of 25% or more. To be a qualified non-metropolitan county, the unemployment rate of 140% of either the national or state unemployment rate. To be a qualified Indian reservation, you must be within the boundaries of an Indian reservation and acquired by the Indian tribe or tribes prior to December 21st, 2000. After that date, it gets more complicated. You can look at it at slide 10 here. Oh, all right. Okay. All right, now let's look at the bottom half. It gets a little more complicated here. So we're going through the where. And we just covered 95%, maybe not 95%, 80% of the where we just covered. Census, and it's just what you answered in that poll. Economically underdeveloped, poor section either by Census Tract, county, or it could be an Indian land, which is, therefore, I'm going to say presumably less well off than other parts of the country. But there are other areas as well. If you look at that map down in here, they call it expiring. So let's look at this first one, a redesignated area. Rita, are you there now? Rita, is your sound muted maybe? No. All right. How about somebody giving me a state from where they are? Take a look at that. Anybody from southern United States, out lower than Virginia, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, Minnesota. Here we go, Minnesota. That's a good one. Let's take a look at that. We'll look at a redesignated area in Minnesota. I'm going to zero in on that. And we're going to see around this big lake here, Manhattan, Crosby, Pine Center. Let's check county. Now, do you see that? Look at that. That's pretty significant if you ask me. That's all these reds, they're qualified hub zones now. If you ran those income and poverty tests, they would pass now. They passed the latest time it was taken anyway. These didn't. And what that's saying is they used to be. They used to be hub zones, but they are no longer. They wouldn't meet the test. If you ran it today, they don't meet the test. So they are expiring. They were redesignated from a qualified non-metropolitan county to a not qualified county. But nonetheless, if or when a tract or county ceases to meet the qualifications for HUBZone status due to changes in income, unemployment, or poverty data, it becomes a redesignated area. As a redesignated area, it qualifies as a hub zone for a period of 3 years. So you got a 3-year sunset period on that. So that was a good example. Camellia, thanks. And as you can see, if it was originally a non-metropolitan county, I guess the good news is it's becoming relatively better off financially. It doesn't, so therefore it doesn't qualify as a hub zone anymore, but they'll give you another 3 years. And the Census Tract one. So here's the same thing. No, excuse me. Let's go with, if I can see a blue. The red one means it was formerly a county, and then it no longer qualifies. The blue one is it. Okay, now here's one up by Duluth, more northern and away from the water in Duluth. So that Census Tract up there in Chester Park used to be a hub zone. Now it no longer is, so it's got 3 years from the time it was redesignated to stay in the program. All right, that's an expiring number one. Expiring number two is a disaster area. Who's in an area that's been hit by a disaster lately? One of those hurricanes, maybe? Those are the ones recently. Can someone type in an area if they've been associated with one of those hurricanes that swept through? Okay, now let's look at Puerto Rico. Where's that? Let me down here. Yeah, so I can always just type it in too. Puerto Rico. Oh, here's Puerto Rico. They found it for me. All right. Puerto Rico, here's the island. I don't have anything selected in my legend. Let's click disaster area. Huh. Maybe that's because that's interesting. You know, most of them are. Most of the island is a hub zone. Virtually all of it. But I don't see any that were a hub zone. What I got a question is, what is the difference between the red and blue colors? So the red in what we just looked at, if you were a non-metropolitan county, so a rural county, you were a hub zone in 2017. SBA then ran the numbers and said, Manhattan County, Minnesota, you're making too much money. You're not in the hub zone program. Get out. When the SBA says that, you then have 3 years to stay in the program, and then they would designate you with those red slashes. If you were around Chicago, like we were looking at, and you were one of those census tracts just off the water there, and then you started making more money. Citizens started lowering the unemployment rate, getting the incomes up, and they fell out of they no longer qualified for the program. They would stay in it for 3 years, and it would show up on the map as a blue diagonal. So the ones that no longer qualify and were qualified census tracts are blue diagonal county, non-metropolitan counties in red. Now we're doing the same thing with here, but it's a disaster. The redesignation is based on no longer meeting the HUBZone tests, which is, in a sense, I would say a good thing. Now the disaster area is something different, which we're going to talk about. Okay. And I know we can find some in Florida. And there they are. Let's zoom in. You can see them now. There's North Carolina, South Carolina. These are all got because of the hurricane. Let's zero in on this South Carolina one. And there was that other hurricane that came through as well. Can't remember it at this point. But I am seeing red. I'm seeing one's geographic areas with a horizontal red stripe, geographic areas with a horizontal blue stripe. Okay, disaster area. So if that area in South Carolina, this one here, let's say it was a hub zone, it's now 2018, it was a hub zone way back in 2013 in October. It lost its designated hub zone status a little less than 5 years ago, way back in 2013. Then Hurricane Maria comes through. The president, Trump, declares that this area got hit so hard, it's a major disaster area, part of that Stafford Act. We went through that a few webinars ago. So the president declares this county, whichever one this is, as a major disaster area due to the hurricane. Because, one, it was declared a major disaster area, and two, it was a hub zone 5 years ago. What does that mean? That means it becomes a hub zone again. It gets reinstated. And it's for 5 years. I don't have it listed here, but we can go out and look at that with this statute. Well, let's go out and look at it. Disaster. In the case of a major disaster declared by the president, a census tract or non-metropolitan county may be a qualified disaster area only during the 5-year period beginning on the date that the president declared the major disaster. That's a little, you have to think about that one. It is a little confusing, I found. So, you know, if they were a hub zone back in 2013 and 2017, they were completely out of the hub zone program. So they were that's after the 3-year grace window that they would have fallen under the redesignation category. But when that major disaster hits, you go back 5 years. And then they're going to keep this hub zone designation from 5 years when the president declared that Hurricane Maria or whatever, Hurricane Irma disaster. Same thing with that census tract. Red designates a hub zone that was reinstituted, re-upped because of the disaster. Blue is a census tract that was re-upped due to the disaster. That's a mouthful. I got a question here. So Indian land will always be considered a hub zone for the indefinite future. Camellia, my answer to that is yes. My answer to that is a flat yes. Everything I've read, and I'll tell you how you can double check me on that at the end. The SBA holds an open mic and open forum every Tuesday and Thursday between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. I'm confident on my answer on that one, but I hope before It's always nice to check with the actual experts at the SBA HUBZone, and you can do that between 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern time. Call them up and ask them a question. But, yep, as I read it, that's correct. The statute, and there's also a Small Business Act you can read. Good question. Closed base area. So the last thing on that map, if you look at it, is these closed base areas. Let's do that. Now, the closed bases, that started happening back in 2000, right? I think it was and maybe some of you had experience with that. And they went through that thing where they started the base commission, they started closing bases. Okay, so back in 2000, they were hub zones. There was no stripes or dots or anything else. They were just up here in these solid colors. But they've now been closed for so long, they're in that grace window period, that 3-year grace period. Let's see how long it is actually before I say 3 years. Yep, 3 years. 3-year sunset provision. So the only way a military base would now be designated a hub zone is that it's already gone through what's called, quote, regular status. Now it's in that 3-year window where they no longer, I don't know how else they're in the sunset provision. They're in their final 3 years and counting. So here's some bases here. If it was a county associated with a military base closure, it's in the red dots. If it was a census tract, it's a blue dots. They do have these black dots here. I don't know what those are. I asked the SBA a question on that last Tuesday, and they were going to get back to me. So, okay. That took me a while. I got to get going here. I'm always late on this. So that's the where. Any questions on where, kind of how you define subzones or where they are? Okay, let's get into the who. Who are they? So we know where they are. So you got to be a vendor in one of those areas. So how exactly do you qualify to be a HUBZone vendor? This will go quicker. You got to be a small business. You got to be at least 51% owned and controlled by U.S. citizens, a community development corporation, an agriculture cooperative, a Native Hawaiian, or an Indian tribe. 51% by U.S. citizens. That's a short way to handle that. Got to be a small business, got to be owned by U.S. citizens, majority. Your principal office has to be located in a hub zone. That can be tricky, but your principal office, not your headquarters, your principal office. And we'll go through a question on that, a poll on that. Let's see, do I have one? Okay. At least 35% of your employees have to live in a hub zone. So your principal office has to be in a hub zone. 35% of your employees have to live in a hub zone. And you got to get certified. You got to go through the process. One question that comes up is, what if you're like Potomac Wave? We're a small business in some NAICS codes. We're not a small business in others. It goes by your primary NAICS code, your primary industry. That could be a little complicated. But shorthand on that is, what NAICS code do you make the most, are your most of your revenues tied to? If that's an OTSB, you can't be in the hub zone. If it's an SB, you can be. All right, let's see. I do have a good test here. Let's see if we can. This is one that the SBA does. So we said that they're really, the two big ones are your principal office has to be in a hub zone. And that means, forget your headquarters. You know, if your headquarters has 10 people in it and it's in a hub zone, but you have a branch office that has 200 people in it and it's not in a hub zone, it's where those 200 people, it's what office do the plurality of your employees work? What office does that business have that has the most employees working there? Whether it's headquarters or not is irrelevant. what facility has the most employees? So let's see if this meets that test of the principal office is in a hub zone. Company B. Company B is headquartered in a large urban area. Company B's headquarters is in an urban area, not a hub zone. That is not the one. Is that the one I want? Let's see. Yeah, I guess it is. 2 owners and an administrative support person spend the majority of their work at the headquarters. Okay, so the headquarters is not a hub zone. They got 2 people and an admin support in that facility. Across the street, in a qualified census tract, so across the street in a hub zone is a government facility where that company B has 6 employees who work there. So you're on a contract working for Department of Interior, and those 6 employees are in a building owned by Interior that is in a hub zone. Everyone lives in a hub zone. All the employees live in a hub zone. Let's just say that. Now let's say owners and administrative team all live in a hub zone. 6 employees who work at the government site. 1 of them is part-time and works only 20 hours a week. Only 1 of the 6 employees who works at the government site lives in a hub zone. Wow, that's a lot of requirements. So so if you think that through, what is that? Is that a hub zone qualified vendor or not? And here's the answer. Let's just cut to the chase here. No. First of all, if you're trying to determine whether they qualify based on where their principal office is, where the people live is irrelevant at this point. If you're just saying, look, you got to meet both tests. Is the principal office in a hub zone? Well, where people live is irrelevant to that test. I'm not saying it's irrelevant to HUBZone designation. Determining the principal office requirement, where people live, that's not related. And the key point here is when dealing with evaluation of the principal office, where employees live should not be considered. What matters is where the greatest number of employees at any one location perform their work. And if their employees are working on a government site, that doesn't count either. That's not a facility owned by the vendor. That's a job site. So if you got construction, if the vendor is a construction company and they're working on a job site in a hub zone, that doesn't matter. It's where that construction company has offices of its own. That's where you apply the test that the office that has the most employees for that construction company must be in a hub zone. I'll give you some more resources to walk through that. That was a little complicated example, but there are some ones that I have at the end here that we can go through. So that's who. Principal office in a hub zone. 35% of employees live in a hub zone. That's really it. A couple other ones. Those are the 2 key ones. All right, let's see here. Let's look at this test here. So this is the one that I asked SBA last Tuesday. So you make an award to a vendor, let's say, Acme Inc. And when you, as the CEO, make the award to Acme Inc., Acme is not an SBA certified HUBZone vendor. They're not in the program. But 6 months later, they are in the program. They do meet the test for a HUBZone vendor. They do get certified with SBA. Then you exercise an option the following year. My question is, does the option count towards your HUBZone credit? Give it a few more seconds here. It's coming about 50-50. All right, let's close it. And the answer SBA gave me was no, you do not get credit. The vendor must be an SBA certified HUBZone vendor at the time of award. So it doesn't matter that they become certified afterwards, and then you start exercising options, you still don't get credit. Now, one thing they pointed out to me is that the reverse is also true. If you make an award to a HUBZone vendor, obviously you get credit for that initial base year. But if in, 6 months after you make the award to that HUBZone vendor, they no longer qualify, that doesn't matter. That you get credit for the life of the contract. I wouldn't say 5 years. I presume you don't get credit after that 5 years. You certainly would get credit for that base and 4 option years, even though they no longer qualify 6 months after they got the award. So it's what they were at time of award that counts when accumulating those HUBZone dollars. All right, let's go to one of the key parts here, which is the missing Mariana Islands HUBZone vendors. Do we have anyone here, by the way, do we have anyone here from Interior? Could you raise your hand if you're from the Department of Interior? Hey, Nathan. Now, are you with Monica? Great. If you could type in a question as to what bureau you're with, that would be BLM. All right, there's a good one. Let's take a look at BLM, Bureau of Land Management. So I've logged into Fed Data Check. What is Fed Data Check? It's a product, web-based product that 14 agencies use to help them monitor and improve their procurement metrics, FPDS&G data quality, competition rate, one bid rate. Today we're looking at how it can be used to improve your agency's HUBZone rate. So let's look at the BLM, Fish and Wildlife. Boy, I know that's a good one. But let's do BLM. I know that Fish and Wildlife would be a good one. So I'm logged into Fed Data Check as an Interior user. I'm going to go to Small Business and I'm going to click on Potential HUBZone Vendors. This report right now is taking about 30 seconds to run, so it's a little longer than others. So I'm going to click on BLM, and let's see what this report is going to give us is it's going to identify vendors who are a small business and their headquarters is located in a HUBZone. So they are potentially a HUBZone vendor. Now, maybe their headquarters is in a HUBZone, but they have a principal office with 1,000 people doing manufacturing across the river. That's not in a HUBZone. All right, well, they wouldn't count that. Or we also saw that their headquarters could be in a HUBZone, but maybe 80% of their people do not physically reside in a HUBZone. But potentially, they are. So here's GrowPro Inc. has got 1.5 million, has been given they've won $1.5 million in awards from BLM. And let's go take a look at them. GrowPro. And I'm going to open that up. And here's GrowPro's business point of contact, Thomas Jobson. They are seeds and nursery. And they have an active award right here. So they do a lot of work. Here's a couple, pretty good chunk of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's go out and look at one of those awards by GrowPro. So it wouldn't count this year, but it's going through this year. If I come down to the business category, I don't see SBA certified HUBZone vendor. That tells me that they are not, BLM is not getting HUBZone credit for this award. GrowPro is a small business. So what is the big deal then on this? GrowPro Inc. If I click on county, let's go out to the SBA map, which this is hyperlinked to, and look for county Siskiyou. County Siskiyou, California, designation qualified HUBZone. It's got that red county. I don't take you right to the map, but there's Siskiyou right here. I see a lot of red all around it. So you see where I'm going with that, which is, it could be Thomas Jobson and the GrowPro people they've decided at this point it's not worth their time to go through the SBA HUBZone certification process, or they don't know about it. Wouldn't it be nice? Let's assume, Nathan, if you don't mind, if you have a comment here, Nathan, feel free. I unmuted you, but Nathan, I think you could agree with me that wouldn't it be nice if GrowPro was a HUBZone vendor, that they go through the certification process? Why? Well, that means either
the CO doesn't know?
Say that again, Nathan.
Is it possible the CO doesn't recognize that they're in the hub zone?
That's possible too. How did all this get started, by the way? How did we, Fed Data Check, start getting into this line of analysis? Is because of the contracting, I'm going to call them experts. They've been doing it a long time. At GSA Public Building Services, they said, "Boy, we're not hitting our HUBZone goals. I know a lot of these people live in areas that are in hub zones. We think they're not participating in the program." So they asked us if there's any way we could identify potential candidates, and incidentally, we haven't even got the census tracts yet. That's a little more complicated. So what is to answer your question, Nathan? What does GSA Public Building Service want to do? They want us to send an email alert to the CO when an award is made to somebody, to a vendor, and that vendor is in a HUBZone area, but they're not designated as such through that SBA certification process. So yes, to short answer your question, yes. I think a lot of the COs don't know their HUBZone in a HUBZone area, and I think the vendors themselves either don't know or don't want to go through make the effort to go through the process for whatever reason.
Interesting.
Okay, so that was BLM. Fish and Wildlife, we got a good one. I want to go to that one because that gets into the Northern Mariana Islands. And I'm using the Northern Mariana Islands for a specific reason. Monica, I unmuted you if you wanted to walk along with me on this one. Now, the Northern Mariana Islands, you might guess, does have fishery and wildlife awards. I presume that one of their major industries is fishing. Okay, so again, here's all the awards. So these awards, that means Beestrom Oil Company has received 13 transactions. It could be an initial award or a P1, P2 from Fish and Wildlife, and they are headquartered in a HUBZone area. Now let me type in Mariana. They don't have that. I thought you did have a Northern Mariana Islands. I guess you don't. But I know that the Park Service does. So, Monica, let's assume that you're with the National Park Service. If you run this report for your department at this time, it could take a little over a minute. Right now, if you run it for your agency, it'll take about 30 seconds for this report to come back, maybe a little less. So we're looking for the National Park Service, and we're going to look for vendors in the Mariana Islands. So there's one here. HBR International. Let's go out and look at an award. HBR International, purchase order, $7,000. I can see that they are not an SBA certified HUBZone vendor. They are a small business. See that here. Where are they located? Saipan, and that's Northern Mariana Islands. That's what NP stands for. Okay, why is that unusual? Why am I why am I emphasizing Northern Mariana Islands? And it's for a good reason. In this case, let's zero in on it. Here's the Northern Mariana Islands. I'm going to keep zeroing in. Wait for the resolution to come back. We're looking for the county of Saipan. Here it is right here. The whole island is a hub zone. There's not any. So I think you can see my point. You know, I picked out a couple HUBZone vendors here for interior. There's one for commerce. There's no way, how could you possibly not, I guess you could have offices in the mainland, principal office, and have more people there. I don't know where your employees are living. They have to, you know, where's their commute? If you're coming into the Northern Mariana, even Guam, farther down south, you'd have to, you know, fly in from Australia to, you know, so I think if the vendor's in the Northern Mariana Islands or Guam, it's a HUBZone vendor, and they just haven't gone through the process of certification. So why do you contracting officials care about that? You're not getting credit for the HUBZone award. Hence the case of the missing Northern Mariana Islands HUBZone vendors. Let's go to one other poll question here. Has the federal government ever hit its 3% HUBZone goal? Has the federal government collectively ever hit its 3% HUBZone goal? And we're just about done. After this, we're, let's see. Yeah. We are just about done. So we'll be 5 minutes over if that. About half and half. Half of you said that one of those years the federal government has hit the goal. Half of you are thinking it did not. We'll give it a few more seconds here. I did get a comment here, Monica. Thanks for the comment. Many times vendors, and this is Monica's a federal contracting official. Many times vendors are in the hub zones, but they don't get certified or don't know to do that, so we don't get the credit for it. That's right. That's clearly what's going on. I don't have all the facts at my fingertips, but it's happening in the Northern Mariana Islands. I can tell you that for a fact. The answer is no. According to this article by Federal News Radio, the government has never reached its goal of awarding 3% of its contracts. What they mean there is 3% of its obligated dollars to HUBZone. That's interesting. I presume they meant, yeah, no, it's got to be HUBZone dollars to certified businesses. The closest it came within the last decade was 2009 at 2.81%. What's it now? I guess we can check now. We can go out to FPDS&G, see what it is for standard reports. How small Small business goaling, 10/01/2007, 09/30/2018. Execute. So let's see what FPDS&G says it is now. Goal's 3%. Just thinking. While that's thinking, we'll move along. Okay, just to wrap up here, and we'll see what that thing, if anyone else has any comments, please raise your hand. So here's some resources. Here's the key one. SBA, do you want to have a question on HUBZone? I think we had one earlier. Will Indian land, is that forever going to be a HUBZone? That's a great question to ask them. Call that 888 number, plug in that access code. You have a HUBZone experts from the SBA asking any and every question you want about HUBZones. They do have two videos that, they give you a video, ask you questions. They're nice mini primers. There's the link there, the HUBZone map we went through, Code of Federal Regulations. I used to use the Cornell site. This seems a lot better, ecfr.gov, and the Fed Data Check report, which we're rolling out now. We're only catching those that are in non-metropolitan counties, the rural counties. Phase 2 is going to be trying to catch those that are in a qualified census tract. That's going to be a little trickier. In review, the federal government has never met its 3% HUBZone goal. Let's see if that report came back. I broke it out by department, so I don't know what it is overall. But look, if you got the Department of Defense here, here's the Department of Defense. If they're coming in with a HUBZone goal of 1.2%, I don't think the government's going to make its 3% goal. Let's see if anybody is. There's a few. All small, 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 small. So here's the cutoff. Well, okay. All right. In review, lastly, in review, I never met its 3% goal, and this is the assertion. It's not because the federal government is not making awards to HUBZone potentially qualified HUBZone vendors. It's because those HUBZone vendors, potential HUBZone vendors, are not getting certified by the SBA. That's the assertion. So what are we going to do? Let's identify the vendors who do qualify for the program and get them involved. If your department or agency is a subscriber to Fed Data Check, we can send those email alerts directly to the government POC as registered in SAM, or we can email them to the COCSs when those awards go out, such as those that tied to the missing Northern Mariana Islands HUBZone vendors. I do have a question here. It could be because of how strenuous the paperwork is. Thank you, Audley. Yeah. R 19213C says you shall consider socioeconomic programs before going total small business. Nathan, if you could expand upon that. So I think what you're saying is, well, you tell us what you're saying there with that. So you're saying if they are a HUBZone, let's say that it is an SBA certified HUBZone, you give that, per that FAR citation you cited, you would consider making a HUBZone set aside before you make a total small business set aside? Is that your point?
Yeah, that's what the clause says.
Okay.
That's how we interpret it anyways.
Right.
So it's up to us, the COs, right, to discover this, if, to meet your goals, whoever you're
right.
with.
Right. But I think you'd agree with me that if the Northern Mariana Island aircraft charter, which is one of the ones identified in the PowerPoint deck, if they're not filling out that paperwork, that makes it tough.
Right. If they're not in there, they're not in there. But if they've done the paperwork, it's our job as COs to know that based on what the FAR tells us to do. It's kind of what I was saying.
Okay. Good point. That's it, everybody.